is not, it's not the painting. The colors are off. It's like it's a simulacrum of it, and it's helpful to study if you can't go to the Uffizi, but it's not the same.
Right.
Versus I mean, our direct access to what's being talked about here isn't dependent on the Greek, which is also unlike poetry. For example, like Wordsworth in French, it's not Wordsworth, it's Wordsworth in French.
Yeah.
That's not what, that's different here.
Right. Right. Yeah. The only advantage of knowing the original language and philosophy is to get the logical distinctions right. And sometimes these distinctions can be made clear in one language, and because of equivocations remain fuzzy in the target language you translate into.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's helpful to know that, but it's certainly not a sine qua non to know ancient Greek in order to, right? Because what we're exactly what you said, we're not studying syntactic structures of Greek, right? We're studying the attributes of being, and insofar as they can they appear in any language.
I might even take that further. We are right. We are studying the attributes of order as such. So if you wish to distinguish anything, which means if you wish to have order other than chaos, then what does that mean to do?
Exactly.
What is happening there? Yeah,
exactly. And I always want, Thomas always underlined the commonsensical nature of Aristotle. I think perhaps a little bit too much, but the point is that whatever it is that we come to understand through philosophical investigation into the nature of being must itself not only be expressible in our language, but it must be found in our experience, in our language, in our dealings with the world, right? Because being is all of that. And so one might say that Plato's not a common sense philosopher because he's asking you to accept some quite outlandish entities that have no, that are not part of your experience and not part of your world, right? There's some in some ethereal realm, and that's not a common sense kind of philosophy. Whereas Aristotle, no matter how strange his theory seems, he can also show that it's already part of our experience and already part of our language. So he can show it with like syntactic peculiarities or some ways of interpreting prepositions, right? And just little minutia that he's very attentive to. He can show that this understanding that seems so strange is already integrated into the way we speak about things anyway. And so in that sense, he's not asking you to believe in some higher realm or some higher entity. And that's how he was always considered to be. Yeah, but that's just a super important point, that everything is always tied back into, his expressions, but we also say, blah, 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 right? And for him to make his point. Okay, well, looks like, welcome everybody, good to see you. Looks like we got one new person, Jenny. Hey, nice to have you along. I think Sandy will be joining us a little bit later, ideally. So let's get into this. So actually, just I'm going to say one more introductory remark about logistics. So today we're just kind of doing Zeta 3, and maybe it'll take us the full 2 hours, and maybe it won't. And if we end early, that's totally fine. But this book, Zeta, book 7 of the Metaphysics, has been very accurately called the Mount Everest of ancient philosophy. And it is very, very difficult. And so at first I thought we'd more or less discuss everything. And then I read the guy who the famous classical philosopher or classicist philosopher, a guy named Miles Burnett, wrote a book called The Map of Metaphysics Zeta. And in his introduction, he says, when I went to Oxford to study, I took a course on Aristotle's metaphysics, and I had no idea what was going on, but it was so exciting. And then he started a class with the doyen of Aristotelian studies at Oxford, that all the great or all major 20th century philosophers, late 20th century philosophers who were specialists in Aristotle studied with, a guy named Owen. And anyway, they spent 4 years, 4 years just on book 7. I mean, these are capacious minds, and they all became very talented philosophers. But even at the end of 4 years, nobody could actually tell you what Aristotle's actual argument was. Right? Okay, so we're not going to spend 4 years, and we're not going to spend double that on this book. So this section is fairly readable. From chapter 4 on, it gets almost impossible to understand. So so for next time, I am going to assign 3 books, Zeta 4, 5, and 6. And what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about whatever it is we understood. Right, and then hopefully in bringing together the little bits and pieces that we understood together, right, at the end of the session, we'll all have understood a little bit more of this. Yeah, so it is him talking about essence. And so it's a very important, it's a very important step in the path that he's taken us, right? He's taken us in this book, in these 3 books that we're studying. He's going from a very general, very vague understanding of substance that we marinated in, and indeed in its vagueness all of last year. And now he's starting to become more specific about it. And at the beginning, there are a number of various candidates, likely candidates for what primary substance is. And right now we're going to tackle the very first one, which is what he calls the underlying subject, or the substrate. Okay. He will eventually say that fundamentally form is primary, and but form is only primary if it's understood as essence. And essence is only primary if it's understood as act. All right, so we got to go from substance to form to essence, essence to act. Understanding this connection is the goal of reading these 3 books. And once we have act, we'll have enough conceptual tools to turn to his treatment of the soul and the mind, which is the ultimate goal of this group. So we're going to fly through some of these chapters and just cobble together what we can. So the next time, our goal is to read those 3 chapters, 4, 5, and 6, and just focus on what in the heck does he mean by essence. Okay. So in case I forget to say that at the end, I wanted to say that at the beginning. All right. So, but before we can get to form and essence, we have to understand why he rejects matter as a suitable candidate for understanding primary substance. So, can I get a reader to read like maybe the first 2 paragraphs of Zeta 3? Sorry. Maybe I need to be sharing this, get this thing up here. Okay. Sorry, I really am not much of a host. I have this thing open. All right, I do have this thing open.
Suppose I can read, although there's a risk of dog interruption.
Just hold on a second. So if I share screen, there we go. All right. Is that big, or do you need it bigger?
I mean, that
Yeah,
works
so
for
I think
me.
that's good enough. Gray gutters, but
Yeah. For some reason, I just clicked something and the opportunity to, or the controls for making bigger and smaller disappeared. So I can't get rid of those gray gutters right now. I fucking hate this technology. Okay. Yeah. So starting at the bottom, Zeta 3. Tyler, if we're cool with dog interruptions.
All right. Something is said to be substance, if not in more ways, at any rate, most of all in 4. For the essence, the universal, and the genus seem to be the substance of each thing, and 4th of these, the underlying subject. The underlying subject is that of which the other things are said, but which is itself not further said of any other thing, which is why we must first make some determinations about it. For the primary underlying subject seems most of all to be substance.
Go ahead and hit one more paragraph, please.
Yeah. Well, in one way, the matter is said to be a thing of this sort, in another way, the shape, and in a third way, what is composed of these. By the matter, I mean, for example, the bronze. By the shape, the configuration of the form as it is presented to sight. And by what is composed of these, the statue, the compound. And so if the form is prior to the matter and more of a being, it will also be prior to what is composed of both of them for the same reason.
All right, great, thanks. What are your first thoughts? I mean, I think probably the first peculiar thing is, where does he get these 4 candidates from? Did they just pop in out of nowhere, or have we been prepared for them in some way?
got them from the cause store. What
Right.
needs to be an explanation store or whatever. Yeah.
So just without going back over this whole thing, right? Just moving up here. Right. This bottom part that I've highlighted. And we think we know each thing most of all when we know, for example, what a human is or fire, rather than when we know the quality or the quantity or the place. Since of these things themselves, also we know each one when we know, for example, what the quantity or the quality is. And then I'm just going to read one more, also highlighted here, just as a little background to this. Just top of there. That is why someone might indeed be puzzled about whether walking and being healthy and sitting are each of them a being or not a being. And similarly too in the case of any other thing of this sort. For none of these is either by its nature intrinsically a being or capable of being separated from substance. But if anything, it is the walking thing that is a being, and the sitting thing, and the one being healthy. These things are evidently beings to a higher degree because there is some definite underlying subject for them. So there we have a clear reference to the underlying subject and why we might suspect the underlying subject to be substance. And the second passage emphasized what he says. When we know what a human is or fire, right? So what something is, what it is, right? Essence. So the beginning has already given us reason to suspect that either essence or the underlying subject is substance. Any thoughts on that, on this set of quotes or questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of them have something kind of important in common, which is that they have to do. Well, actually, the universal throws me a little bit, I have to say, because it seems different than the other three at first glance. But the others seem to at least relate to things that can admit of some unity of properties, that they are the basis of that unity.
So, Michael, it's one way to view nominalists. Nominalists believe there are no essences.
That's correct, right? But their understanding of what an essence is might be somewhat different than what Aristotle develops. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just would you mind explaining how you got to that thought? It might be illuminating for people.
Well, the argument about sexuality. So to say that man or woman, there's no essence of man,
right?
Is to say it's just socially constructed, and it's
right,
which means it's based on power relationships, right?
Right. Yeah.
It really undermines any sense of truth at all. Actually, I mean that's going to be evident, I think, as we get through here.
Right.
It really it's the dead end that nominalism gets to. It really can't say anything at all.
I think
or the same. It can say everything.
Yeah. No, I think that that makes sense. I mean, I think given this material that we just read, it's clear that Aristotle is making a distinction between being in a higher sense and being in a lower sense. And we certainly have bumped into that over and over and over again in our encounter with substance and accident, right? And even though we don't know very much about substance, we worked with the examples that he gave us, which is this human being and this horse. And the fundamental idea there is that the horse is, grazing, or the horse is brown. The brown depends on the being of the horse, but the horse doesn't depend on the being of the brown or of any color whatsoever. It can be any color without ceasing to be a horse. So substance accidents is already a hierarchical order of being. Once we've comprehended the difference between a substance and accidents, we've already conceded that there is being in a more primary sense, a fundamental sense, a higher sense, and being in a derivative or a dependent sense. Right. And so I'm only bringing that up because questions of sexuality and sexual identity, maybe it takes work to figure out if that is a substantial identity, the substantial form, or whether it's accidental form. And so so it's not clear, but yeah, but for Aristotle, it's got to be one or the other, if it is at all. And that's something that, for instance, the nominalists can't even begin to grapple with, because there's no such thing as a primary word as over against a derivative word, right? They're all on the same plane. They're all of equal primacy. And so the hierarchy of being is already collapsed into, just a one egalitarian world, right? Where nothing's higher, nothing's better. It's just desire Okay, but don't get me started. Okay, thank you.
His notion of higher and lower is based on the idea of separability, which gets you at that substance. Well, I'm not sure. Like if substance is the answer to what is, that's the only thing that's non-separable. But it sort of seems like that's almost begging the question in a sense that the question of what is separable versus not implies that there is something that's not separable, or so something, you know.
What's the question being begged? I'm sure you're right, but I just didn't quite catch it.
So if, I mean, the question is like, if you're going to attack the thing, the most fundamental thing will be that which is not separable.
Right.
So I can pull walking out of Aristotle or out of Socrates. Aristotle also walked, I guess, but anyway, and that's, so it's not primary. I mean, Aristotle, even if he's not walking, or if he's not tall, or if he's not blonde or whatever, those are all separable. So those are not it. So whatever's left over after you strip off all the separable things, but that sort of presupposes that there is something left over in a sense.
Right. Right. So, so maybe you and I see this slightly differently, because everything I strip away is precisely not separable.
Sorry, yeah, I said that wrong. Right.
Okay, cool. Okay.
It does not exist if it's without being inherent in substance, right? It's not
exactly.
If you try to separate from the substance, it no longer is there, as it were. It only has being. Its being is dependent upon the being of the whatever is not.
Exactly.
I always say it backwards. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. Oh,
Peter,
right.
that's like the brown color of a horse.
Huh?
Like the brown, I'm asking Peter, really, the brown color of a horse. That's what you meant by separated. The brown can be separated from the horse.
Well, no, if you separate the brown from the horse, it goes, there's no brown left. I think is how Aristotle thinks it.
Right.
You can't have just brown sitting around having a cup of coffee or something, right?
Right. No, I see how this came about, right? Because separable is equivocal, right? And there's the one hand, there's the separability of substance, insofar as it has independent existence. And there's also the separability in the sense of abstracting features or qualities from a substance. So that he talks about here in Zeta 3. I think that's how we got into the linguistic morass here.
Regards the universal, your conversation kind of made me think of this, but so one thing that the reason it might be in there, we could be wrong here, but it's that when we say anything about anything, we are saying something universal about something universal in at least one sense. Which I think you can see why it would be a candidate for substance. Because it's anything we say something about what is, in any sense, we are somehow. You can see how someone might conceive of that as saying something about the underlying subject or substance.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Brown is also a universal, and that's non-separable. Did I get that right?
Yes. Right. So Tyler, an example would help. So are you thinking like horses or animals, or are you thinking about like this horse is grazing? Well,
it could be either. So when we say is, right, we bring in this sort of we're predicating about a whole implicitly.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. Did you fudge by saying whole?
I don't think so. I think so.
Meant underlying subject, right?
Right. Yeah. The underlying. It's like if everything is accounted for only if there is this substance. When we say anything about anything, we are somehow indirectly talking about substance, even if we don't necessarily say it right or mean to be saying that.
I think Aristotle said, says that, every predication has a subject, and so every predication treats the subject as underlying subject. But so every predication mobilizes the idea of an underlying subject. But the question here is the underlying subject the proper way to understand substance? So you see the difference?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Phil, okay. Yeah. So if I predicate, if I say of white that it's a color, all right, so white's a color. I am treating white as an underlying subject by predicating its genus to it, right? But white is a quality, and so therefore it is not separable. It has no independent existence. It needs a substance for its existence. So even though I'm treating white like an underlying subject, it's not substantially an underlying subject, right? It's just a quality, and qualities, white and tall and red and then quantities, 5 feet tall and relations. These are all things that don't exist independently of things that have these features. And then these things that have these features, that's at least at the beginning what he was calling substance. In the categories, he called it first substance. So I just wanted to point that out because it sometimes is confusing, right? We can ask, what's the what is white? And now we're asking the essence question of something that in itself has no essence because it doesn't have any independent existence. So so this is a big thing about Aristotle, is that these categories that allow us to divide the world up, allow us to also treat things that in different categories as if they belong to a certain category, and that allows us to unlock certain aspects of their being for our knowledge. So I realize that might be a little bit confusing. Maybe I didn't explain it very well, but that's my first stab at it, at least. Tyler, you wanted to say something, and then Philip, if you want to follow up on this so we can get a little bit clearer, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, about the universal, I was thinking maybe a better way to approach it is to think that in terms of being or matter, which is that it's kind of the universal abstracted from the particular or the singular. And so it may seem to be that which is underlying everything in some sense. But the problem, of course, can be that if you treat it in a way that it's separate from all these things, it cannot be the underlying substance, because then you need a further whole that includes both of them together. But that's probably too long a tangent to go on.
No. I mean, I think that the universal and genus, I think that's just a reference to the Platonic forms, right? And since that's a viable theory in his time, he includes it as a possible candidate. And so I guess what threw me a little bit, I don't want to discuss it too much, but I just wanted to point it out that right, we've got these 4 candidates for substance, and it sounded like you were talking about the universal as the underlying subject, and Aristotle's got these 4 different candidates as substance. And so not all of them are candidates for underlying subject, but rather the underlying subject is a candidate for substance.
Yeah.
Phil.
Yeah, I mean, the way we're discussing, it almost seems like, once again, I'm not familiar enough with this, but it almost seems like substance is such a mysterious thing that it cannot actualize itself unless it has these other things attached to it to manifest itself in actuality. So therefore, substance itself, it seems to me, cannot be grasped by the senses alone.
Sure.
It is only accessible to mind, which may have an understanding of the invisibility of the substance, because the senses only understands the property that's attached to it.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I think that's a good starting point. And one of the things that we read last week, he was basically saying the most obvious examples of substance seem to be perceptible things, like this horse and this human being, right? And so that's where we're starting. We're starting with perceptible things and trying to find out if any of them are themselves a primary substance, and if not, if there's something else that would count as primary substance. So we're starting with the things that we're most familiar with that seem to be substance. And what we're familiar with is that is the horse that grazes, and we're not familiar with the idea of grazing with the property horseness, right? that would be weird. That would be not common sense, right? So
is the difference between that substance and Plato's forms then, in a sense that you must build up with the senses, only then can the mind come to understand the invisible thing.
Right.
And so there is a kind of connection, because the way it's been talked about so far, it seems like the substance is so remote that the mind can only get there. But how does the mind get there without the experience? Whereas I think the Plato's forms seem to be like, no, it's just this separate realm that you understand. I guess if you're very, very smart, something of that sort.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's the whole mind versus senses thing is kind of a Cartesian tradition and less a Aristotelian one. So he understands that there are just as many true things to be said about mathematical objects that are not perceptible objects as there are true things to be said about perceptual objects. Right? And so he doesn't privilege, he doesn't philosophically privilege things available to perception because of mathematics, right? And then on the top of that, it seems like we need additional insight into the nature of mathematical objects, and that nature of mathematical objects is not necessarily itself mathematical, right? And so we have at least these three realms, right? The perceptual realm, the mathematical realm, and the nature of things realm. And then the question is what are we allowed to say about this nature of things realm? And his word for that is substance. So his method is, let's start with stuff that's obvious and evident, stuff that's available to perception. But we're not going to tie ourselves to the idea that the sensible realm is truer or more real than the other two. We're just going to inquire. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the remark. And substance is remote, but it's at the same time it's the being of things, and there's nothing more present to us than the being of things. It's almost like it's very far away because it's so close at the same time that you can't see it. Anyway, yeah, thanks. Philip, and then Richard.
Yeah, I thought of a fifth, if I may be so bold, for substance.
You thought of a what?
A fifth.
Yeah.
He gives four, but
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So a substance is a whole. And yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
right. When we say like the being of a horse, right, or the substance of a horse, it's not the brown doesn't make it a whole.
Yeah,
it can be lame and still be a whole.
Yeah,
but without a whole, we wouldn't call it a horse.
Yeah. That's super interesting, and I don't know what to say about it right now. I know where to look in the dictionary where he talks about the whole, right? Because he's going to tend to want to say, you know, the horse is one, and why is it one? Well, because of its form, that's essence, its act, right? And how whole relates to that, I actually can't tell you. But I think you're absolutely right that is that it's got to be it's got to be bound up with this whole question, and then it's an additionally interesting thought. You know, why is the whole not so integral to Aristotle's discussion right here? The one thing
Yeah,
that
and
occurs,
I would probably advert that the relation between substance and whole is not accidental.
You know, the only thing that's occurring to me is the Greek term for universal is katholou, right, which means with respect to the whole. So on the one hand, the whole thought is already right, but the whole thought is already in this universal, the word universal, but it's not the way that you're thinking of whole.
Yes.
You're thinking of whole in the sense of one, whereas he's thinking of whole in the sense of all sorts of different things, you know, or this whole being sayable about many different things in the same way, the way animal is being said about all the different species of animal in the same way. All right. Okay. Anyway, yeah, that's very interesting. I'll take a look at the book Delta where he has a entry about the whole. See if I can figure that out, because that's super interesting. Thank you, Richard.
Like what you were saying just a little bit earlier, like perceived objects versus like was a substance, like
Yeah.
or I don't know if you or someone could possibly relate that to the like Kant's idea of like the thing in itself, like das Ding an sich.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna two guys were just in a Kant seminar. I'm gonna let them do that, but maybe you could just briefly describe what it is that you think, where the connection lies in the first place that makes you want to ask that question.
I don't know if I can articulate it yet. I guess I'm trying to see if there's the connection.
So, but now let's get more specific. You want to know the connection between the Kantian thing in itself and what else?
Or I guess like Kant's idea of like the phenomenon and the noumena. Like does that that come into play here?
Okay.
I can sort of see where that might question sort of arises, because in some sense, the underlying or substance seems this elusive thing that we know not what at this, at least this point in our Aristotelian studies.
Nice.
And that's sort of exactly what is intrinsically the case with the thing in itself. We almost by definition, we cannot know what it is. But I think that's going to be different than Kant, because Kant will never get to the thing in itself. But I think Aristotle will get to substance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's nice to put.
Yeah, I think I agree with Peter, and I also think I understand where the question could come from as well. And another thing you might consider is that there's some substance behind appearances, and so every time we predicate about appearances, like we're kind of predicating about the substance, but in an indirect way that becomes a problem for knowledge. But yeah, I think Aristotle is definitely not presupposing at all that there is an external noumena at all.
Yeah. Interesting. Nice.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks for the quick question, Richard. Phil, I see your hand.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on what Philip said.
Cool.
And it seems to me that whole is a reasonable candidate, because I think of the whole as a kind of transformation of Plato's forms, the relationship of part to other parts, and that, you know, for instance, a chair is made up of parts. You know, you put it together, only then do you have a chair. and the colors could be attached to it. That's part of the whole of that particular chair. So it's not as mysterious as Plato's form, but it does give you things that is constructed, put together in some way. And there are many things in nature itself that are made of parts that creates a whole that's separate from a singularity, you know?
Yeah, right.
So I think that might actually be a reasonable candidate, although I'm not sure if Aristotle like putting the concept of form in there in that particular way, because that sounds a lot like Plato, although that's not Plato.
Yeah.
It's pure Plato. So
it seems
Yeah,
like
no, thanks.
certainly that Aristotle is more into the immanent form than sort of a separate realm of form, but that doesn't make the form, in a sense, more tangible. It's still only graspable, I think, by the mind, right?
Right.
But it is, in some sense, nearer to us or something.
Yeah, you know, this also relates to Richard's question. It just occurred to me, and there's a kind of inverted Kantianism going on in Aristotle, insofar as that which is most knowable to us, that the first kind of things we know, the perceptual world, is the least knowable in itself. And so the thing in itself is actually, for Aristotle, or the noumena, the thing that you'll never ever really get a handle on is what's right in front of your face. There's always going to be some residual unintelligibility about what you perceive. But the method of Aristotelian science is to go from what's first for us, but least knowable in itself. And so there's always going to be particularity and cultural individuality and social norms and customs that have something to do with it, and those are always different. But if you go from what's most knowable for us to what's most knowable in itself, right? And that's, you know, that's the nature of things. You get away from what is less knowable in itself to what's most knowable in itself. So ultimately, things like the principle of non-contradiction, you know, is one of those most knowable in itself, and therefore it belongs to being qua being, and it's much more knowable than, you know, why the glass and the book is in front of me right now. Because there's no necessity to why the glass and the book is in front of me right now. That's just a bunch of what he would call coincidental causes. But the principle of non-contradiction and such like things like substance are most knowable in themselves, and because of all the necessary relations that are bound up in them. So my idea is, you know, what's noumenal for Aristotle, what's not completely and totally knowable, that you'll never completely make sense of, is the stuff that's right in front of your nose. So I just wanted to throw that one out there.
So
I got Philip York and then Phil.
Yeah, so that must be the reason that, like in Paradise Lost, the Satan, Lucifer, or Satan really, after he's fallen, is so much more compelling than God or their archangels, because Satan, as he is knowable to us. He's most knowable to us.
Yeah.
God and the angels are least knowable to us. They're most knowable in thought, but they're the furthest from us.
Right.
What's closest to us becomes more compelling.
Yeah. And the most inscrutable, the most unintelligible is, you know, what's.
Yes, literally unintelligible.
Yeah, I mean, like why are there only, you know, 7 colors or whatever, or why can we only hear a certain range of sounds? I mean, these are you know, there's a certain element of unintelligibility, and that unintelligibility always comes out when people say, well, because of this wavelength and blah, blah, blah. And that's just the way it is. That's just how your ear is, or that's just how your eye is, right? And that brute fact, that's just how it is the confession of that there's an unintelligibility, right? There's no reason for it. There's no ground for it. There's no reason why. So anyway, I just wanted to make my point even stronger by saying that.
Yeah, and then I would add to that. We have this phrase, the horror of war. I think the true horror of war is actually its unintelligibility and randomness.
Yeah.
But we cover it up with like, oh, this child died. No. That's not the horror of war. The horror of war is the unintelligibility of it.
Interesting. Yeah, that brings it definitely to a deeper level. I definitely agree. That's interesting. I got Phil and then Peter.
Yeah, I have a question about this sort of substance that's sort of reasonably invisible, but it is very real. And its reality comes from the fact that other things are attached to it to manifest it. A little bit like, and I don't want to claim it's exactly like, but a little bit like a bulletin board. You could just sort of pin things on. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of like the underlying subject. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if that's the case, how sticky is the substance? And I'm asking this question because I recently was in a meeting about Hegel, and we came up with religion.
Nice.
And people were talking about, well, if you really take at the world religions, the core essence of what it is about ethical behavior in relationship to others. And I would agree that's true. But different religions are so different. And I said, well, that's because religion itself, even though it has a core value, it's very sticky. And all sorts of individual things could be attached to it that in some sense has nothing to do with the core.
Yeah.
Or you would say the substance of what it is. And if this basic substance, how does it know what is permitted to be attached to it? And how is it sticky and how is not sticky? Right. Because otherwise, you could just sort of like, oh, it's this and this and this, and it could be everything. It would in fact be the universal thing in itself. So that's a strange idea, because now you have to figure out, is it like a hook pin thing that only this kind of thing got attached to it? It's just like it's just sort of a little bit confusing, because you don't want it to be universal to everything that could be it, but you certainly do want a certain amount of variety. Otherwise, you just have the same thing. Yeah, that's a question. So I don't know.
Does anybody have any thoughts about that? I mean, I'm kind of a killjoy about that by just saying, religion is not a substance for Aristotle, so that's not a problem. I mean, I don't want to be a buzzkill if that.
No, I'm just using that as a metaphor. Come on.
No, yeah. No, I get. Yeah, I see that. But but the thing is, the thing about religion is that it doesn't necessarily have any clear contours about what belongs. I mean, religion as such doesn't necessarily have any contours about what belongs to it as such and what doesn't belong to it as such. Every particular religion will demarcate a sacred space from a non-sacred space, and so that distinction is important to every religion. But religion itself doesn't, can be all-consuming. Everything can have a religious connotation. So there's a certain problem of definition of religion, and it's like impossible from the outside to establish its boundaries, and anything that can't have its boundaries established doesn't have an essence, according to Aristotle. And so there's always going to be this indeterminacy. But let's see, Peter dropped out. I'm going to give, but maybe Amjol has a response to Phil's remark before I circle back to Peter. So Amjol, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I kind of like Phil's response about the substance being sticky.
Yeah.
Because then, certain properties adhere to that stickiness
Yeah.
in a way that some properties won't. Like,
Yeah.
for example, suppose someone says fire is a kind of substance,
Mhm.
and property of being cool does not stick to it.
Indeed.
But then you can also could say, no, 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 we shouldn't put the stickiness on substance. We should put the stickiness on the properties.
Interesting.
It's the properties that are sticky, not the substance.
Mm-hmm.
So then, it's kind of interesting. You can play, or you can maybe just deny both of those and say, no, there's a relation between them. Forget about the stickiness. It has to do with the relation. So, a third thing that combine the two. But anyway, that made me think about notion of stickiness.
That's awesome. Thanks for that remark. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a very suggestive metaphor. So I appreciate that. Peter.
Oh, I was going to just follow up on the Kant thing, but it's fine. We can just go on.
Come on.
I was just going to say that, okay, so if Kant's phenomenal noumenal distinction, phenomenal or appearances are the only thing we have it's closest to us in Aristotle's terms, and for Kant, we can never get to the thing in itself, as it were, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for Kant, well, actually we do. I guess Kant's most noble in itself would be the categories, I guess.
Yeah, good point.
I was just trying to, it seemed like there was like something, this inverted Kant versus Aristotle is kind of interesting, but I haven't really worked it out yet.
No, but I like that, because obviously that which is most knowable in itself, it clearly belongs to the mind in Kant, right? And that's a kind of a topos of modern philosophy, that the mind knows itself best, and there's something like that going on a little bit in Aristotle, insofar as the higher you go into the knowability, the more it's nous knowing itself, but nous is not quite the same as mind. Okay, anyway, I didn't want to.
But when you get higher and higher in Kant, you get less and less content, right?
Beautiful. That is such an important, that is an absolutely.
Because I was just thinking like
point.
the empirical eye versus the transcendental eye. I mean, the transcendental eye sort of, in some sense, sees the empirical eye, but there's absolutely nothing to the transcendental eye.
That's right. That's beautifully said. Thank you very much. I'm just going to say that again, because I think everybody should put that in their pocket, and because it's such a huge distinction between ancient and modern philosophy. The higher you get to the first principles of modern philosophy, the more you've abstracted from concrete experience. And so the higher you go, the more abstract things become, and the emptier those top categories are, right? They've lost all the rich content that experience originally gave them, and then through this abstractive process, we get higher and higher and higher, but we lose the richness of experience, and then we get what we call abstractions. Whereas with the Greeks, the higher you go towards principles, the more generative they are of multiplicity. They're like they're more pregnant with reality. So as you go up to higher and higher principles, those are causes of more and more things, and therefore have the possibilities of those things in their in their scope, in their nature. So as we go up, we get richer rather than poorer. And so we can't talk about abstractions and ancient philosophy, because we're not losing anything. We're actually gaining explanatory power as we go up. And explanatory power there means we're getting closer and closer to, or getting more and more to the causal origin of many or most or all things, right? And so the highest principle. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's super huge, and that's why, as you go up to things like being or unity, or soul in antiquity, you're not losing content; you're actually gaining it. Whereas for the modern, what starts with and just assumes that the richness of the world is available in perception. But once we start thinking, we start losing. We lose colors, we lose sounds, and we get like abstract concepts like substance and mind and extension and space. So we're losing there. Anyway, yeah, thank you. I think that's huge, and that's such a huge difference between ancient and modern philosophy. And it's really good to be aware of it at all times.
Yeah, I think so. With abstractions in modernity, they're typically, I think, treated as that through which we're supposed to determine what is not abstract,
Yeah,
but they're treated as an apparatus.
yeah,
And the problem is, if the apparatus is this mediating thing, and we're trying to use it to get at what is more real in some sense than the abstractions that we take to be the apparatus, the apparatus of abstractions, right, can only in a sense determine what it is as a aggregate of abstractions.
Yeah,
It limits itself to just basically a kind of tautological structure.
yeah. Nicely put. Yeah, exactly. Which is why you get then, the idea that the mind imposes its structure on things, and then the mind cuts us off from reality. I mean, this is an absolutely contemptible thought for the Greeks. You have not understood mind if you think it could cut you off from reality. All right. Anyway, so that's I don't want to get on one of my hobby horses, but thanks for the thought. Thanks for the interesting discussion, guys. I really, ladies and gents, and let's move on a little bit with the text.
Actually, before we move on, there's
Yes,
one I wanted to bring up.
Heath,
And
awesome. Thank you.
I want to bring this up in general because the distinction between, because I mentioned like last week, I was also looking at the Thomas Taylor translation, and so there's one part where it's translated differently. I think it also has to do with what someone else said about that maybe the whole should be one of these, a fifth thing. So there's a line in the Reeve. It's actually on what you guys showing right now. It's in the bottom of the second paragraph. It says, and so if the form is prior to the matter,
right,
and more of a being, it will also be prior to what is composed of both of them for the same reason.
Yeah.
But saying in the Reeve that the form is prior to the matter, and in the same way, it is prior to the composition of form and matter. And I have something a bit different in the Thomas Taylor.
Interesting. What do you got?
Which says, so that if form is prior to matter and is more being, that also which is composed from both of them will be prior for the same reason.
Will be what?
Will be prior for the same reason.
And
I'll read that one more time. So that if form is prior to matter and is more being, that also which is composed from both of them will be prior for the same reason. So what I'm reading here is that form is prior to matter, and the composition of form and matter is also prior to matter, which is the same thing as saying that a whole is prior to matter.
I think that's actually good. I saw some commentary that made that point, and I didn't get it out of the Reeve text. I couldn't quite figure out where they're coming from.
It's crazy because I also looked at the Aquinas Aristotle that I have, and it uses the same thing as Reeve.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, but only Taylor has it differently, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. But this is starting to appeal to having the whole be prior, to use that word, which may not be quite right.
But it may, so if form is prior, then the form matter compound will be prior to just the matter.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy idea to say that the combination of form and matter is prior to matter. But
no, exactly right. That's one of the super exciting ideas that's going on here. So thanks for pointing it out. And thanks for noticing that distinction, because I think it makes sense of the paragraph a little bit better, the thought here.
Yeah, and I could say more about that, but I think we should keep reading on first, because it kind of clarifies why the matter can't be the primary substance, I think.
Well, we actually really didn't talk about this paragraph at all, and we did read it, right? So maybe it's worth somebody who recollects, why are we talking about matter and form and the composite in the first place? And that's my leading question to what do you remember about what we talked about in the physics, and why these concepts aren't just lying around in the street. There's a reason why they're the relevant here. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them so we can clarify this paragraph a little bit before we dive into the critique of matter.
I mean, I'll throw out that both seem to be necessary for change.
Right, and we're talking about perceptual objects. They're the first things that we're inquiring into, and so they're changeable things. Exactly.
Yeah, I think he's just going through, all the list of things, like in order to even talk about something, we have to have, you have to talk about all of these. And so by going through this list, he's saying, okay, well, what of these things, what are the combinations, and which of these is the most prior and the most essential, or most
right
subject.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
So your Michael, your question is, where do the ideas of matter and form come from? Or
Yes.
yeah.
All right, and that's so what I'm hoping is that somebody will rehearse the concept of change. You've already put your finger on it.
Okay, yes. Because in order for something to change, there has to be an underlying substance. So something can change its shape, just like I can take silly putty and change its shape. Therefore, there must be an underlying matter. Otherwise, I couldn't change silly putty like that.
Okay, awesome. So you made one conceptual jump. There's got to be an underlying subject, and for
Yeah.
changeable things, that is matter.
It doesn't have to be matter.
Yeah,
I'm saying
exactly.
it's matter in that case, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes sense of why he's introducing it here that way. Yeah, thank you. Tyler, did you want to jump in?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I thought you said something at the same time as Keith. So I see Phil's hands raised.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna say this in very sloppy language because it's not quite right. From what you say, if form is prior to matter, and when they're put together, that itself is prior to the thing itself.
Prior to the matter.
Yeah, prior to the matter. Okay, that's interesting because the way we think about it, at least the way I think about it, is that somehow this new substance or this new thing is born out of a kind of creative invention of some sort. But now this puts it in a different matter, a different tack, because if it's already there, invention or creativity, it's actually just sort of a discovery of what already is there to manifest itself. So you are at best, how should I say, a midwife to birthing in the world, rather than the fact that you actually invented or created this thing.
Yeah.
So which is interesting.
It's more like an assembly line worker. You're assembling prefabricated parts. That's the creativity is not so isn't described in such romantic terms amongst the Greeks, which I kind of like. Tyler.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so in terms of form being prior to the matter, I thought of the comments on craftsmen, right? So a craftsman starts with a form and brings matter into that form in order for it to function.
Okay.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, no, awesome. Yeah, that reinforces what Phil was saying. Richard.
This is just more sort of side commentary, not really Aristotle, but just sort of like related to Phil's idea of like, in kind of in our world, we're so obsessed with, being the creator of something, and then like, that, oh, we're so original, or like, every influencer is like, oh, we're the most authentic. And then you kind of look at it, everyone's just trying to, it's all this mimetic madness, right? And like, let's not even get into the like how dysfunctionally broken our intellectual property system is, that our whole society, which is also killing, like our whole like technological society, which is also killing us, but it's like it's all built on top of like a thing before it, right? And we're sort of anyway, but never mind.
No, awesome, thank you. Topical contemporary connections to Aristotle are always welcome.
I'll just point out, following up on that comment, was of
Awesome.
intellectual property. I took today off because my stupid company was having their annual patent push, and there was like 3 hours of meetings today on like, what is a patent? What can be patentable? Let's try and get some more patents, because they just want to spend a week churning out patents, and I'm going to refuse, and they can fire me if I don't, if they want to, but I'm not going to participate.
All right. Okay, so getting at this whole change thing, I know you've heard me talk about it this a million times, but I'm vary it up a little bit. Aristotle is trying to show how change is possible. And because he is grappling with the Parmenidean thesis that being is. Doesn't sound very challenging, being is. However, it has the devastating consequence that change is impossible if being is. Bam. Right? We discussed that ad nauseum, I think, last year. So I'm just recalling it. Right? If being is, change is impossible. And Aristotle at the beginning of physics says, well, if there's physics is about changing things. And so we have to figure out what change is, because if being is and changeable things are, then there are no changeable things, which is to say that change is just an illusion. Right? And so I'm not going to rehearse the whole idea, but his alternative suggestion of what is change, an alternative to the Parmenidean idea that that change is something when something becomes something else. That idea leads to the impossibility of change. And so Aristotle comes up with an alternative understanding of what change is that does not fall victim to the Parmenidean critique. And so he says that whenever something is changing, three things need to be understood about that thing that's changing. Namely, there is something that undergoes change. There is an end state of that change. And in order for the change to happen at all, that thing must lack something. All right. So, and the basic idea is if something is already pale, it cannot become pale. So it's only because it lacks paleness that it has the possibility for becoming pale. Okay, so matter is anything, matter is not physical. Matter is just what is undergoing change when something changes. Form is that which the thing is the end state of the changing, because when it changed, it's becoming its end state. Right, so if something's becoming pale, right, it's not pale at the beginning, but it has paleness at the end. And it's when it reaches the end that we can then look at this whole process as one of becoming. So, I mean, add one more level of, one more example, and then I'll let people jump in. So the important thing is matter is not physical. And as an example of that, we take the craftsman building the house, and the house is built of timber and brick. And timber and brick just lying around is not a house. It's only when it's brought together in a certain form that it is the matter of the house. So brick and timber lying around are not the matter of the house until the house is being built, in which case then it's brought in. So it's not the matter of the house until, it's not matter until it's being used to build the house. Okay, now let's say a wrecking ball comes and destroys that house, and we have a pile of dust and rubble left behind. That is not the matter of the house, because you cannot build the house with it, right? It is potentially the matter of something else, whatever it is you can do with that rubble, right? Then it's the matter of that. But since it's no longer, you can't build a house with it anymore, it's not the matter of the house, even though when it was timber and brick, it could be the matter of the house if you built with it. So the idea is that there's nothing that is in itself matter. The point is that something is matter only in combination with a form, right? So the form of the bricks and the timber become the matter of the house when they're brought together with the form of the house in the building of it. And the rubble pile, let's say you can make, I don't know, maybe you can reconstitute brick and timber out of it. Then that's the matter of the brick and timber, but it's not the matter of the house. It will only be the matter of the house if you reconstitute the brick and timber and then build a house with it. So matter doesn't refer to anything in particular, but it's only what comes to be in a form. That's matter. And so there is no understanding matter without form. Matter is always dependent on form.
So matter we called manifested form.
Yeah.
Manifested in matter form. Nice.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I'm just going to go down the row of patient people who waited for me to finish up and let you speak your mind. So I got Phil and then Bo and then Peter.
Yeah, I do want to make, I've been thinking about what you said last time about Parmenides. And I was thinking, I'm definitely not on Parmenides' side. So let me put that out at first, okay? But I could see that, that I wonder whether the Greeks after Parmenides are just not captivated by the idea of thinking, because otherwise our thinking would stop. You just go to the temple and do that. And that's an illusion because you're not singing and you're not chanting, but nonetheless, that's what you do. And everything will continue to be the way it is. Everything is fine in some sense, right? but on the other hand, I'm not so sure whether they actually are so concerned about reality as it is, as they're more concerned with thinking, because that just sort of stops thinking, right? Yeah. You have to have thinking, and in order to do that, you have to have this dialectic going on.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So therefore, I'm wondering whether they believe more in thinking rather than reality. They created a reality out of the thinking, but which one actually was the thing that produced what they did?
When you're referring to you're referring to Greeks generally, or
I think
Parmenideans?
generally, except maybe Heraclitus. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, just briefly, that's kind of the critique of Parmenides, is that there's nothing at all to be said, right? If what he says is true, he can't even say it, right? Because that, and so Plato, I understand Plato and Aristotle as two separate responses to Parmenides, and that both take Parmenides much more seriously than they take each other. So I don't think Aristotle takes Plato that seriously, or he builds on him too much. And Plato, is a teacher of Aristotle. So I don't think of them as much as enemies, as two people grappling with the momentous consequences of the thought being is. And what that means, it means that all differences are illusory, change is illusory. Everything that is distinct from another thing, all distinctions disappear, and including the distinction between truth and falsity, between the only thing that's still remains is being and non-being, right? So all those distinctions disappear, and they're both dealing with, it seems ridiculous to deny that being is. So how do we deal with it? How do we deal with this and still be able to do justice to this insight, and nevertheless make room for truth, knowledge, and distinctions? Anyway, yeah, thanks for that thought, Bo, and then Peter. And I saw Rich dropped out, but you always can jump back in, Rich. Sorry, Richard. But first
Uh,
of all,
And first of all, I would like to thank everyone for this discussion this evening. It's just fantastic, and I'm enjoying it immensely. So I just want to thank all the participants. It's just really been great. So I was sort of thinking about Parmenides. And so what we have is being and non-being. And I love the thing we stumbled upon about creativity, that it already existed. In a way, I'm beginning to wonder if Aristotle accounted for non-being by just saying, well, it exists as potentiality. For example, say lack. It's not like, well, it does exist potentially. So I'm glad you said yes, Michael. So that was my thought. And I would say this, that I worked at a technology company back in the day. I remember my coworkers would say, gosh, it looks like the competitors stole this idea. Like, do they have access to your computer to see your mock-ups and everything? And I would say, no, it's obviously the next step. So I often felt in invention, it was very path dependent, that it was, it was kind of obvious to someone thinking about it. And I always felt that way. I rarely felt that anyone was stealing things from my computer. I just thought we're all thinking this through, and we're all arriving at what's, obviously sort of already exists as potential, and we might as well manifest it. So I really love the way we characterize creativity this evening. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, awesome. Thanks for the remarks, Bo. Peter, and then Richard.
So there's something that kind of bothered me about your house and rubble example.
Yeah,
just the way you phrased it at the very beginning. You said something that just seemed to me flat out wrong.
Okay.
So you have a house made of timber and brick or whatever, and it collapses down. And now you have a pile of rubble.
Mm-hmm.
And you said something along the lines of, it's no longer matter because, or at least matter for
it's
the
no
house.
longer the matter of the house.
Yeah, I'm correcting myself there. It's no longer the matter of the house because you can't rebuild it into the house, which doesn't make sense. It just seems to me that it's no longer the matter of the house because the form of house has left the building, as it were.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I have to think about that. What you're saying is absolutely, definitely right. And I have to think about whether what I said was.
And also had that excellent pun about having left the building.
Yeah, I said pithy. Right on, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my point is that debris is basically is at most the matter of
rubble,
bricks and timber, and not the matter of the house. And so
no, we all agree that it's not the matter of the house.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
the
what I wanted to say
is at the very first was
it's it's the proximate matter, not to the house. When in other words, you can't immediately just use it to build a house like you can use bricks and timber, right? You have to reconstitute it. So it's not the proximate matter of the house, it's the proximate matter of the bricks and timber. So I'm actually bringing in this Aristotelian thing, proximate matter, and I shouldn't because it's just presupposes too much. But no, I totally accept your critique, and I think it makes the example clearer. So thank you. Just don't get used to that. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm already there, man.
Richard and then Philip.
Just kind of following on to Bo's comment, this kind of myth romantic idea of like invention. I think it's sort of an interesting coincidence to me, at least, like, much of modern philosophical thought is in response to Newton. But if we actually look at it, like kind of a little bit, like Newton and Leibniz, independently invented calculus. Right. So it wasn't this one guy, this Prometheus, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like the stage was set sort of like in terms of like what ideas were present at the time, right? So, but I mean, Newton had so much influence, him being on the Royal Society of whatnot. But I'm sure people who really study math realize this, but I think sort of just kind of in the way we sort of like to romanticize kind of our modern founders, it's Newton invented this, and then
But that's the thing. The romantic conception of the creator attributes the creator the divine ability to create ex nihilo, and from Aristotle and your point, right? The conditions were ripe for certain inventions to be made by brilliant minds in the 17th century when they both invented calculus. Yeah, it's not a creatio ex nihilo, right? But the Romantic conception always wants to think of the creator as having this divine quality. So yeah, super interesting.
I mean, and on the flip side, we like to attribute sort of like the source of all evil, as Hitler, or as Putin, but
yeah,
I'll get off that for now because that'll go on for a while.
Okay. No, but point taken. Yeah. We got Philip and then Phil, and then we're going to definitely try to get to this next paragraph and see what sense we can make out of it. But we've prepared a lot, so I think that it should just all fall into place. Philip York and then Phil, and then Sandy.
Yeah, so this creativity thing, it is a, this is going to be diversion into Gerard, but that this romantic idea of creativity actually elides the distinction between humanization and divinization.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The other part. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for the ancient Greeks' idea of theosis, or the human and the divine meet, it was never in making shit. It was always in knowledge and the kind of knowledge that Aristotle calls something divine and something like that. So knowledge is where God and man meet, not in making stuff, and that changes when knowledge loses its prestige and it just becomes a kind of hypotheses and stuff like that, right? This divinity is then invested in human beings, not in the human beings' poetic making ability rather than the cognitive ability of nous. Yeah. Anyway, go. Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that.
So the right, and it becomes versus there's an aspect about nous that's actually receptive as opposed to that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So one translation I'm starting to use for form as we talk is form is boundedness.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Kalos. I like that a lot. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's what you should be thinking of, right? And boundedness itself is a highly, and it's very determinate. So that's,
as opposed to actuality.
Well, you're being a strict Aristotelian, yeah, but as a kind of, sorry to say this, Philip, but as a kind of crutch to get at the Aristotelian notion of form, boundedness is a very, very good one, and that will also help to understand why act is always the actuality of limitation, right? It's always so it's all bound up with this whole idea of limit and being something determinate. Yeah.
We'll see this in Hegel in the Act. So anyway.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's all Hegel, but.
So whenever you have any questions about Aristotle, all you need to do is read the Phenomenology of Spirit, and it clears it all up. Phil and then Sandy.
Yeah, I want to at the end tie to what Bo said, because that was worth a comment. But I first of all, I'm an artist.
Yeah.
So it's a teeny bit upsetting to say that the creativity was whatever. But I accept it in this sense, because when I start a work of art, for instance, a painting, I have an idea. I'm going along with my idea, my craft, whatever it is, goes along. And usually the best things happen when the painting begins to tell me what it wants to be.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Yes.
And then it becomes like a mutual dance, a cooperation, right? Moving it along, it's telling me I'm trying to move it along, and then sometimes divert from it. It tells me. So that partnership that's created is what produces the thing. So it's not just like, I had this idea, is complete, I'm just going to put it down, which is like craft. And so I think that's interesting, because the form is open to me in some sense, and it is sort of telling me like where the possibilities might be,
right,
that I had not realized. And I think that is actually quite realistic.
Yeah.
It's a cooperation. And what
Yeah.
I like about Bo, what he said is that he actually completed a circle. The form have left the house, right? In other words, it's gone back to possibilities.
That's Peter.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer an actuality. It's gone back to the possibility where it began. So I think that cycle is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, it might not be reborn in the same way as
Right.
before, but nonetheless, it has sort of left the house. That's a nice comment.
I think that's a very, very important phenomenon to keep in the back of our minds, just because it's something that Aristotle and Plotinus especially deal with. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's very, very powerful. And I think it's illuminating of certain relations that we're going to encounter with respect to knowledge. It's the same kind of, bringing things to say what they are. I mean, that's the logos that you were describing in your relationship to the painting, where the painting itself starts to take over. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Sandy.
Hi, sorry for coming late.
Oh, good.
My question is about, this is very interesting, all the stuff people are saying, and I'm interested in wondering how I can apply this to actually reading Aristotle's text. Okay, let me just explain that. So I'm just a little, it's hard, reading this text, trying to understand it. And then when we come and we discuss it, there's always so much more that is said than what is on the page, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little confusing sometimes because, you can question if, like, wait a minute, what he just said there, how does that relate to everything we just said? And then trying to go back and forth and do that. It's not that I don't like what I'm hearing, because I do. It's just, so I'm just wondering, like, is this like chemistry where you have to learn all of these little, I don't know what you want to call them, elements, and so you have to do all this like book work, and then there's like a lab where you go in like I'm just trying to understand, you know what I mean? Because or is it like cooking, for example, like when Aristotle says like substance, genus, form, all this stuff comes up, and he's saying that there's, it seems like he's trying to get us, the creativity thing is interesting because it almost seems like he's trying to get us to sculpt something in our mind, like we're trying to put these things together in our mind so that we can then see it, you know what I mean, or understand it. And it kind of reminds me of cooking in that regard. And I'm really bad at cooking, by the way, because I'm always just like, I guess I'm a romantic at heart, because I just like to be able to just do things, and I don't want to have to explain how I did it. And I don't want to have to, I hate the fact that everything is so step by step. It drives me nuts. Like it just, and so I'm wondering, like, what exactly is Aristotle trying to get us to do? I think obviously, yes, he's trying to get us to build this thing to try and see it. But then sometimes it just gets really confusing because he's really stressing substance here. I saw that he was like really making this emphasis on substance.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of reading it sort of like being like, okay, well, substance. Okay. He wants us to focus on substance. So I'm just going to wait until he tells me what substance is. I know it sounds kind of lazy, right? But
if it makes you feel better, Sandy, I think, like, wasn't the beginning, Michael, where you were talking about these philosophers who are spending 4 years unpacking this?
Yeah.
And they still weren't quite sure at the end. You can go back and see that in the video later.
Yeah, I don't want to be repetitive, but I guess I was just wondering what is it like chemistry? Is it like there's this lab session that we're having with the stuff we read, and then I have to go back and hit the books and try and understand? Like, I'm trying to understand like how to go about it, because it's just, I'm reading it in a kind of, I'm just letting it wash over me, frankly. I'm just going to be really honest about that. And I know that's, but it's like when it's that hard, that's just what you have to do. I'm doing the exact same thing in the Proust group, by the way. I'm just like, I don't know who these people are. I have no idea what's going on. I'm just trying to make sure that, okay, that happened and then this happened. And then I know that that's not even true because it's totally like not linear, but I'm trying to get some kind of idea. So I'm just, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of doing the same thing with Aristotle, and I don't know how bad that is or if it's wrong, but I'm kind of just trying to zero in on the substance thing.
Right.
And I like, don't get me wrong, like I understand that they're like, and it seems to me he wants us to recognize the relations. Like, what's the relationship of form to substance, or what's the, it's not the relationship, but he's always talking about certain things coming before and coming after. I don't know what the word for that is. It's not like a time thing.
No, it's
But
priority. Yeah, it's priority.
yeah, priorities. So there's like priorities. So I'm just trying to straighten that out in my head.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand what those are on top of it. And I'm just trying to get the priorities straight first. And maybe, am I doing something wrong by doing that? I guess that's my question.
No. No, I mean, you just, I mean, yeah, in Aristotle, you just have to start swimming. You have to start swimming and things, repetitions and stuff like that start making sense. Now, we did get off on a.
Let me say something in that regard.
Yeah.
You know, like Heidegger actually is helpful. Heidegger is incredibly difficult to read for me, but his idea of thrownness is you're thrown into this whirling pool of water, and you don't know what the hell things are, and you're going around and around, and pretty soon you begin to catch some ideas, and you develop this sort of what you would term hermeneutic interpretation of what the thing is. And as you go around, you begin to get more and more things connected together in this sort of interpretation. And you have to be engaged in the interpretation and swimming in this whirlpool of confusion in order to get clarity, because things pass by and they'll come back around again and again and again. And then this is the activity of what you would call Dasein does, you know, like you can't just, otherwise you will have a thing where you just lay down like all the things like mathematics, you get A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you haven't engaged in the process of interpretation and true understanding of how these people who came up with these ideas, they themselves were confused, you know? So I think it's okay to be confused, except when you're with a group that don't want to let you be confused, and then you feel oppressed. So.
Yeah. Cool. Sandy, the best thing to do is to be an active learner. Activate your capacity of learning, and that is just asking questions. And because the more you try to actually formulate in your head what's going on so that you can raise questions, the more pieces start falling into place. So just kind of, that's something I recommend. And I think that's good because it will always bring us back to the text. I mean, I think any discussion is going to lead towards what most interest people, and very often what interests people is not Aristotle. So it's easy to go away from Aristotle. And on that note, let's at least get to some of the highlights of his critique of matter. So the conversation has at least given me the opportunity to talk about matter and form, and then Peter and others have added to that and corrected that. Thanks very much. And so hopefully we have a pretty good understanding that matter is not a thing, form is not a thing. Right? They're when we have a changing thing, right? We have to distinguish what's changing from what it's changing into, and what's changing. The word for that is matter. So whatever it is that's changing, that's matter, and whatever it's changing into, whatever is the end state, so the changing stops, that's form. And so we don't have to think about form in some wispy heaven, and we don't have to think of matter as some kind of physical molecular structure or something like that. Obviously, a molecule itself has form, and it's not just matter, because it's distinguishable from other molecules, and anything that's distinguishable is going to have form. So I just wanted to kind of recall that whole discussion that we had about matter and form. They're not things. They're ways of being, to use, or modes of being, to use a Spinozan.
Okay, that's really helpful right off the bat. Okay, so I'm sorry. Matter is things that are in the process of changing, and form is
It's
something.
what's changing. It's not a thing. It's what's changing.
What's changing? Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
What's changing, and then form is
right. The end state that also is the signal that the change has completed. Right. It's the telos. It's
the telos. Okay,
that's
form is
right.
the telos. Okay, that's helpful.
The change. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
So right, so we can't go out and go out in the world and point at things and say that's matter, and then point at other things and say that's form. No, especially if no change is happening, you can't make that distinction anyway. So it's only with changeable things that are changing, right? You can distinguish in the changing that which changes and that what it's becoming, and and so in anything that's changing, what changes is called matter, right? Because it's the one that's receiving the form, and what it ends up as, the quality that it has, that's its form, and that is the completion of the change. And so it's not just form; it's also a final cause. It's also purpose, or whatever, it's the end state. So right. I wanted to make that distinction clear. And now let's jump into this next paragraph, and to save time, because we are kind of running out, although I'm happy to go over time today if you feel like it. Right, let's get into I'm going to read this next paragraph. With all that in mind, Aristotle writes, it has now been said in outline what substance is, namely, what is not said of an underlying subject, but of which the other things are said. We had that from the categories. That's been constant through the categories. So that should be familiar. But we should not say only this, since it's not enough. For it itself is unclear. And furthermore, the matter becomes substance. That can't be. Later we'll say that's impossible. So if we think this way, matter automatically becomes substance, but that can't be. So we now had to say, why does matter become substance if we approach it this way? Okay, let's see what his answer is. For if this is not substance, it escapes us what else is. Seems obvious. For when the others are stripped away, we do not see anything remaining. What does that mean? Let's see what he says. For, whereas the others are affections, products, and capacities of bodies, length, breadth, and depth are quantities and not substance, for the quantity is not substance. So in the others, features, heat, cold, length, color, are stripped away, right? The others, we don't not see anything remaining. Rather, that primary thing to which these belong, that is substance. But when length, breadth, and depth are stripped away, we see nothing left, unless it be something that is given definition by these, so that the matter alone must appear to be substance for those who investigate in this way. So let's get the basic idea here. So I've read, so you've heard my voice. What's the basic idea? What are you getting out of this? What's his critique?
So I do think one thing that's important that's going on is that we have a sort of addition and subtraction way of getting at things.
Yeah.
And so we can see that if we treat the affections, products, and capacities, right, as simply things added to some other thing, then when we go through a series of removing them, we are effectively left with nothing. And so the result is that substance is a kind of nothing at the end, or
right.
matter.
So we've got the bronze statue, and we take we take the color away, we take the features of the statue, the face away, right? And we take the weight away, and we take the weight away, and what else? I don't know, whatever else you can take away from a statue, sorry. Right? Presumably, you're not left just with bronze, but you're also left with a completely shapeless, featureless, contourless something or other that when you take away the copper and you take away the tin that is bronze, right? You just get this amorphous mass of God knows what. Okay, Peter.
I mean, if you strip everything away, you've stripped away the essence in some sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's a super interesting point, but I'm not going to go there right now because it'll take me too far afield. But yeah, we've taken away something essential from this in our taking away all the features, which tells us that at least some features are essential to the thing. And right, so I think that what he's first of all doing here is saying, it's, if you investigate this way, if you want to find out what something really is, strip properties away. And once you get all the properties away, well, that's the substance of the thing. That's what all of the properties are being said of, right? That which you can't strip away, that's the substance, that's the vehicle, that's the underlying subject. That and his whole question is, is matter as underlying subject substance? So if we investigate this way, that's what we get. This shapeless, amorphous, featureless, indeterminate blob with no contours, no bounds, no limits, right? And that is then what some thinkers would say, well, that's the substance of things. It's just sheer indeterminacy, right? All right, so, and matter is what that is called. And he's going to go into this, but I see Phil's hand. So before I read the rest of the paragraph, I want to get Phil's remarks first. So go ahead, please, Phil.
Yeah, I wonder whether the times has changed, because I could understand living in a world in which, even though it's a small world back then, it seems limitless, but only recently do we understand, in a sense, a bigger picture of relationship of things related to other things in an ecological structure. Yeah. Okay. So when we throw away the garbage, we used to didn't think about it. Mm-hmm. But now we know that it washes into the ocean and it has this giant shape in the middle of the ocean. Yeah. Because of the gyra. And it does have a form. Yeah. Of sorts. An amorphous form. And so can you actually ever destroy form? Or do you destroy one kind of form into a kind of another form that's more amorphous, that has the potentiality of becoming another form? Yeah. And you just don't pay attention to that form until you do pay attention to it. Yeah. So I mean, there's I just going to correct a couple things. No form ever becomes another form. When something is hot and then becomes cold, the form hot itself doesn't become cold. Heat does not become coldness, but rather the one thing loses heat and gains cold. So forms themselves never turn into one another, but the underlying subject, that which changes, right, loses one form and gains another. So that's an important Aristotelian point. Forms don't become one another. I forgot what the other thing is I wanted to say about but yeah, we need to hold on to that Aristotelian point, otherwise some of this will get really murky. But the other thing is, forms don't arise. They don't come to be in. They don't pass away. They're not destroyed. They're eternal. So what form is? That's what we're in the process of trying to understand. Whatever that is,
those don't come to be and they don't pass away. So yeah, those 2 points that I wanted to make Aristotelian corrections to your notion. If you want to jump back in the queue to respond, please do, but I'm going to hit Peter and then Sandy.
So if you stripped away everything that we said of whatever, and you think there's like something left over, then it's, you sort of mentioned it in your comments that you have something that's sheer indeterminacy, and it's hard to understand that could be substance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the point he makes in the following paragraph.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
matter is something that is supposedly something that requires qualities before it becomes whatever it is, but that's not what substance is. I think that's why, because at the very beginning of that paragraph, he says, well, you just scrolled it off, right? What is not said in outline that substance is, namely, what is not said of an underlying subject, which other things are said, but that is not enough. We have to say more about it.
Right. And the point is that if you just take it, and this is super interesting historical point, if you just take substance as underlying subject and you understand underlying subject as that which is never said of anything else, but things are only ever said of it, right? What happens is matter is substance. But that's the doctrine of the categories. And the categories is the only thing anybody ever read of Aristotle for 1,000 years. They didn't read the metaphysics, right? And so Aristotle was often accused of being a materialist. And he's pointing out in the metaphysics, not in the categories, precisely why that's exactly right. That's exactly right that the ones who came later accused him of being a materialist because they only had this understanding of matter, that was a substance that was given in the categories that we read. And they didn't have the metaphysics, which is a correction of that. So yes, super, super interesting. Sandy.
Okay, well, that sounds like it's a little bit more advanced for me to understand the false understanding, and then I just want to go with the correct one. And
that was just a historical aside.
Okay.
Aside.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying it's irrelevant or not interesting. It's cool. But like I said, I'm trying to just So I just want to the amorphous indistinctness that you were describing. That's matter. I'm sorry if these questions are really basic and dumb.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what those who inquire this way.
Oh, right? Those who inquire this way
call substance, right? This matter, this indeterminate whatever that can take on all these forms that we stripped away. That's matter. And so that's Aristotle's understanding of matter. But what Aristotle is saying is those who inquire in this way call that matter substance, but that's impossible. And he'll give us the reason here. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just a mistaking one thing for.
That's right. So they're right to call that matter.
Okay.
But they're wrong to call matter substance.
They're right to call that matter, but they're wrong to call matter substance. Okay, I see. And are they doing that just because that's all they see or understand?
Because because they think that abstraction or analysis is the proper method to get at the real nature of things. So by stripping away all the stuff that, so if I have a thing with all these properties and I take a property away and there's still that thing, right? Then I know that what I took away is not its substance, because that thing is still what it is. I took it away, and I take another property away, and that thing is still that thing, and I take another property away, and I just keep doing it until there's no more properties to take away. And that which, in our thought experiment would remain, right, is simply that which can take on forms. It's just this potential to take on forms, and itself doesn't have any form. And that's why we call it formless and shapeless and indistinct and all the rest of it. Right? And Aristotle's saying, yeah, that's matter, because this is what we need to think if we want to understand change, right? But there's no way in hell that's substance. That's not the being of this thing, because matter doesn't have any properties of its own. And so it can't be the being of anything. It can't be what things really are. Because things are always this such or this somethings, right? They're always specific, determinate beings that are distinguished from one another. But matter doesn't distinguish anything from anything. So Sandy, that's an answer to your question. Is that helpful for understanding, or did I?
Yeah, that's helpful. Was this some kind of like intense breakthrough in thinking, or is this just run of the mill? This is what Greeks talked about when they, went to the spa or whatever. Like everybody was talking about. Like I'm just curious. Like,
well, that's an historical question, yeah. So, but much is new with Aristotle. The whole four causes is new, and and the question of substance. He said somewhere in one of the earlier books, that the inquirers got so many things wrong because they didn't know to inquire into substance. Right? What makes this thing and no other thing? Well, what makes this thing this is never its matter, which is just this indistinct possibility of taking on any characteristic. Sandy, I'm going to give you a chance to follow up on that if you want, and then I'm going to go to Richard.
no, I'm good. Thanks. That was helpful.
Okay, awesome. Richard.
So I think you're sort of answering the question I was wanting to ask, which is like, it seems probably like, I'm wondering if part of the problem is like when Aristotle's referring to those who investigate this way, like, do they even have agreement of what the signified of substance is? Like, or whether those that investigate this way, which is not like, which is actually kind of maybe just akin to even like just our kind of our modern day, or like our kind of our day-to-day thinking that matter and substance are like homonymous.
Right. Well, for instance, the contemporary materialist will say that what's real is matter, right? And so they're not. They're actually synonymous. Matter is what substance is, and everything is fundamentally matter, right? That's the contemporary materialist position, right? But you'll notice that they can never really say what matter is. They can only tell you what it's not, and ultimately, it's just an invocation not to use God of the gaps types arguments to explain things. So it's a concept that doesn't have any, it doesn't have any contour for us any more than it, in a sense that it did for Aristotle. But Aristotle, that's its precise its nature, not to have any features whatsoever, but that's what allows it to become anything. That's the aspect of things that allows for change. Now, I don't want to accidentally reify matter. Matter is always relative to the form. So yeah, Sandy.
I'm just trying to understand, like, or I'm just thinking,
awesome.
Like, would so those that think this way, it's such a diplomatic way to troll people. Gosh. So those that think this way, I'm just wondering, at what point would those that think this way just completely abandon the whole idea of substance at all? I mean, I realize that there's a confusion happening. That's what he's trying to highlight.
Yeah.
But wouldn't at some point the whole concept of substance just drop out completely if those that think this way just kept on thinking this? And is he, like, I'm just curious, you know what I mean? Like, I understand, I mean, maybe I'm hair splitting here, but I was just curious because, I'm curious at how these things are coming, into how the thoughts are even like arising,
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously he's talking to those that think this way have not gotten to that late stage kind of dementia that I'm describing. but I'm just curious, if those that think this way would maybe at some point actually get there. But I mean, I guess that is just what happens when the distinctions collapse. Then you don't see anymore.
Right.
But it's interesting because he's like having us imagine these two things as one while seeing them distinct at the same time. It's kind of like, whoa, so yeah, that was my comment.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So I think everybody gets this idea. And so we're just going to I think I'm going to skip what's in the parentheses because I think we've gone over that a lot because we've talked a lot about the nature of matter. But let's get at his argument. Why is it impossible that this amorphous, formless, indistinct, this whatever, I mean, what are you going to call it? It's not a thing, right? Why is it impossible that that is substance? And in a sense,
The
it's going to refer back.
leftover.
Yeah, exactly. The residue. All right. So let's finish this up, at least this paragraph. Well, then, for those who try to get a theoretical grasp on things in this way, according to this method, those people, matter turns out to be substance. But this is impossible. In fact, both separability and being a this something seem to belong most of all to substance. And because of this, the form and the thing composed of both would seem to be substance more than matter is. Still hesitant, said seem to be. Tyler, I see your hand. Did you want to jump in or do you want me to finish that paragraph first?
Oh no,
Either
you
one's
can
cool.
finish. You can finish.
Okay. But the substance that is composed of both, I mean of both the matter and the shape, should be set aside. Right? Those are the changeable things, the things available to perception. For it is posterior and evident. And the matter too is in a way evident, but the third must be investigated, namely form. For it is the most puzzling. It is agreed, though, that some perceptibles are substances, and so it is among these that it should first be looked for. So we're going to go back to the perceptibles in order to look and understand form better. Okay, so that's the next books. All right, go ahead, jump in there, Tyler.
Yeah, one thing, so when he says this way, I think he's talking about the addition subtraction way. I think part of what he's saying when it comes to separability, lack, and these kinds of concepts is that we also, in order to understand even addition and subtraction, we're going to need unity and division. And so I think the addition and subtraction becomes incoherent without considering first unity and division.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? I mean, I think I see the point, but I'm not sure.
So in order to add or subtract from things, right, they already have to have a certain order.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right. They have to be already divided, but within some higher unity. And so the way in which they are divided has to be able to change into some other way of being divided in order for the addition or the subtraction to be possible.
Example?
So,
Sorry.
okay, yeah.
I'm grasping at straws here.
So he takes the example, let's take the statue again, right? So you can, let's say you want to change the statue by chipping away at it into a different form.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you already have to have, right, is the material of the statue that you're going to chip away at, and you have to have its potential to not be comprised of air or whatever is going to fill that space once it's chipped away.
Mm-hmm.
And so there has to be this potential, right, for this whole space in which the statue is in to change in relation to what is taken up by material into the form of a statue and what is not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much that helps so far.
Not sure either. I'm going to marinate in that a little bit, and if jump back in if another formulation that might be more illuminating occurs to you.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks, Peter.
So for a second there, it seemed like all of a sudden form just made this appearance out of nowhere. It was very permanent in the end in the way it just showed up in this paragraph, it seemed. But I guess in the stripping away, one of the things that you couldn't strip away was the form. Is that true? Is that why it's one of those things that's non-separate? I mean, there's two things that are
Maybe what you did is you kept stripping away, formal qualities of it, and without knowing it, also essential qualities of it, such that it had no quality and therefore no distinctness whatsoever.
I'm just trying to figure out where it just seems like form all of a sudden just appears like this is the divine intervention form just shows up now, and I'm just trying to figure out why.
Oh, because it appeared at the very beginning when he was talking about the things that seem to be an underlying subject, the form, matter, and composite, right? And that's because we're starting with perceivables, and therefore we're starting with changeable things, and therefore what makes a thing a changeable thing is what's concepts.
But in the stripping away exercise, theoretically, what was left over was matter, just pure non-determinist,
exactly,
unstuff or whatever.
Right.
But I think there's also form left over, shouldn't there be, or something?
Why? I mean, so why am I asking that? Right, so I understand Aristotle because of what he said before in the categories and stuff. Right, we make the distinction between accidental properties and essential properties of the substance, that which makes the substance. And that in the categories, he called those secondary substance. All right, and so like the animal and the white belong to Socrates, but if you take the white away, it's still Socrates. You take the animal away, and it's not Socrates. It's not Socrates anymore.
Right. Okay.
So in this thought experiment, we're taking away all those kinds of determinations, indiscriminately of what category they belong to. And what's left over is just this sheer potency to take on form, but itself not having any form. And Aristotle's agreeing that's matter, but such a thing is not substance because it's not a this something, and it's not this something of anything, and it itself has no this something. That's how I understand this.
So back in the categories, form was one of the 10 categories or not? I don't remember.
No, form was form was never part of any of the categories.
Right, okay.
That was only.
So that's the contribution here is we
okay, interesting.
Terms of form and matter.
Right, because we're turning first of all to what's most knowable to us, and that's changeable things. And so he's taken the concept of change that he created or he developed in the physics as the basis.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. Right, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Please keep asking if there's more obscurity. Sandy.
Oh, I just wanted to say, so kind of to answer my question earlier about asking it if this was a cookbook, I now see that that's actually not the case, and it's more like a detective story.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's helping me. So I'm thinking of like reading this in like a film noir overture, voiceover, like, and trying to figure out who did it or whatever. I don't know. I mean,
yes.
I see that now. Okay. So, I mean, just from this little tiny bit that I partake in this discussion has already helped me, because just reading it by myself, I was like, what? So.
No, I really appreciate that. And I'm glad we got to some of the, and I think you're absolutely right. This is inquiry. He's going to go down a lot of dead ends, just like a detective. Right? And so I think if you look at it as a detective story, I think that's really going to firm up what's going on here. So that's awesome.
It's less depressing because dead ends and cooking make me want to die. So.
That's right. So awesome. Peter, your hands back up.
No, it's still up. Let me
Oh.
put it down.
Okay. Okay. So this is kind of a perfunctory end, but he's just reminding us, of two things. Whatever substance is, at the beginning, he mentions that it's never said of another thing, but only other things are only ever said of it. And that makes it the subject, the subject of predication, the underlying subject of predication, hypokaimenon. Okay. But he has also, in those passages I read from Zeta 1 about, we say we know more about what something is if we know it's horse than if it's white, all right? And so here he's getting at this something, right? The horse, the horse is distinct from every other thing by its essence. So this is already an indirect reference to the essence, to the this something, and the separability issue, right? The question is does in order to be, does a thing depend on something else or not? And his point is that all the accidental properties depend on substances, but substances do not depend on accidental properties. So all those features and characteristics that we were taking away from the statue were all of these, accidental properties and indeed essential properties, but that's not my point right now. And so they all are not separable. They need to be in something, but that which they're in, the statue, is not in anything else. And so it's separable. If something is in another, it's not separable. If something is without being in another, it's separable. And the whole separability terminology comes from, Platonic forms. They're separate from the things that participate in them. And so that's where this whole set of metaphors comes from. So one last point, and then I'll shut up. The materialist position here is that the statue appears to be separable, but in fact, it's in another. It's in matter. Okay, so the statue is going to be like an accidental property of matter. And Aristotle's point is, even if it were in matter, that composite would have to be in something else that actually accounts for the specific way of being of this horse. And matter can't do it. So matter can be an underlying subject, but it cannot be a substance, and we have to look for something else. Matter fails as a candidate for substance, and the underlying subject gave us 3 candidates for substance: form, matter, and the composite. He will deal with the composite in Book Eta. But right now, he's going to go after this form, because if to understand the composite, you understand matter and form. So he's going to delay the composite until he clarifies form. Okay, that's the end of what I wanted to say. I see a hand, I see Phil.
So from what you're saying, form is not, substance is not exactly matter. Matter is one appearance of it. But is substance, in a sense, closer to essence than form? And
Yes.
I'm saying this because the bud becomes a blossom and it adopts a completely different form. But I presume he might say, I'm not sure, that the substance remains constant.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure whether when it becomes a fruit, whether it's still the same substance or the same essence. But it seems to me like, so the form itself could could be transformed in relationship to the substance, which is the ultimate container
Right.
of essence. Is that what you're saying? Because I mean that, of course, the metaphor of the acorn and the oak is another example, but it just seems to me like, yes. So substance, obviously, the matter also transforms itself, but the substance is something, I'm not quite sure. It's in between land.
I mean, what I'm going to want to say is the essence of a flower is not any particular state it happens to find itself in, and so the essence of a flower is going to be the, so to speak, the law of development of that. So that there's going to be, so it's going to be the same bean going from bud to blossom to flower, and that progression is precisely what its form and its essence is. And that's why it can change in all these different states without it becoming another thing. So a form is not just an appearance or a shape, but it is the specific nature of that thing. So a rose is going to go through these stages differently than chrysanthemum, right? And so they're going to have different essences, even though each belongs to the genus plant and therefore belongs to the genus life, right? Their essence is what it makes them this kind of thing and not just generally plants or something like that. So form is not shape. Form is not the appearance of the, Aristotle will use the term morphe, right? We get the word like morphological from this, right? The shape is sometimes relevant to the form. Sometimes it's coincidental to the form. So with living creatures, that essence is going to be the law of its inner law of development and the way in which its processes take things and make those things matter for its own becoming, right? So that if we make that distinction that the form is not the appearance, the outward appearance or the shape, but with living things, the law of its development, so that all these different outward manifestations are all manifestations of the same thing, then we get closer to what this essence idea is.
So acorn and oak have the same form?
It's their physics, right? It's their nature, isn't it? No?
Yeah.
Well, certainly it's potentiality. That's certainly true.
Well, that's a complicated question. I'm not quite sure. What I want to say, but it might be inadequate, is they have the same essence because they're stages of development of some one thing, right? But it's going to have different. Some of the properties it has are going to be essential to it being this thing, and other ones are going to be accidental to it. And so there's going to be a coming and going of forms, right? But the kind of coming and going of forms that is describable in the acorn becoming an oak. Is internal to its essence.
It seems to me he really have to leverage the relationship between realities and appearances then. Because the appearance of the form certainly is extremely different.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe he's saying, no, that's only the appearance, not the reality. Wow.
Yeah, I think so. But he's not making that distinction. He doesn't use the distinction between appearance and reality, but rather what essentially belongs to a thing and what accidentally belongs to a thing. And it's easy to think that certain accidental properties are actually essential ones, and certain essential ones are accidental ones, and that would be falling prey to appearances, right? But that's not really how he talks, right? It's we need to get what's essential to the thing and distinguish it from what's only accidental to it in order to understand its particular nature and why it behaves the way it behaves. Tyler, you got your hand up.
Yeah, the state thing made me think of a way I might be able to express the divisibility.
Oh, beautiful.
But I'm not sure. I'm just going to try it. So in order for things to change from one state to another state, there needs to be a space, let's say, of actuality and potential. And then there needs to
Right.
be higher space in which both of those spaces are and can move into each other. And so what I was trying to get at with the division is that with that higher space has to be capable of being divided up into different ways in which some things are actual and some things are potential. And that has to do with things having or lacking properties and gaining them, and their capacity to move from state to state.
So are you saying that like a genus is like, for instance, a genus is both an acknowledgement of the kinds of capacities the thing has, and therefore what kind of what it can actualize, but it's also a delimitation of the thing from other things, and thereby, you know, implicitly forbids certain capacities. For an animal to be an animal, it can't, I don't know, it won't have the capacity to I don't know, blow up like a volcano or something like that. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Okay.
Well, it has that aspect, so that the space of the actual determines what is possible.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Okay. I'm getting your thought a little bit better, but I still feel like I botched it.
That sort of reminds me a little bit of that article Philip sent back a while ago, where the sort of the essence, I forget, it was like the essence of something was like the set of all possible, the limited set of potentialities that this thing could have. That was kind of like its identity. So the acorn can become an oak, but it can't become a volcano.
Right. Right, but you know, that's kind of looking at it from the God's eye view, because because it needs to actualize certain capacities in order to have the capacity for other actualizations. So there's going to be kind of a sequential linearity to these living beings, and it's not just a abstract set of capacities it can or can't have. I'll be right back. I need to be right back.
Yeah, that one of the there's maybe a good and a bad way to interpret that quote, which is, I think the bad way would be to say that somehow it belongs to, say, the acorn to be burned in a fire because that's possible for it, right? I don't take that to be what you're trying to use it to get at, but that's one potential way to take it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was like the set of potential. Well, so as an oak, the potential for burning is not in it. But maybe as a as wood or something, it has potential for burning.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think of it, because as qua, we have to get into the qua acorn or qua oak, the burning is accidental, but qua the kind of material it's composed of, that material has its own different potentials.
Reminds me of Clark's cloak. He didn't quite get the idea that the Quay cloak, it didn't matter whether it was wool or not.
Well, I'm thinking of like an octopus. Some octopuses could change the colors and change the shape so that it could look like a, you know, like a rock or a clam. It's like, and so it's almost as if they have a toggle switch into potentiality and actuality. They could toggle back and forth. Now, we can't change our colors. I mean, at least not easily. You could go and get a sunburn, I suppose, but we can't do it willfully like an octopus can. I mean, it's just amazing what some of them can do. Like they just disappear totally. Yeah, depending what environment they're in, because the way they imitate certain environments in terms of color, it's just like they're practically indistinguishable. Sharks will swim right by them, and that's it.
Well, Everybody stayed an extra half hour. That's a pretty good sign. That was a good discussion. So if anybody missed my announcement at the beginning, we're going to read Sandy. The next 3 books are going to be complete hell for you because they're going to be hell for everybody. And so basically the assignment is just, he's going to start talking about essence, and it's very hard and nobody completely understands it, but we're just going to cobble together a group understanding of some of the salient characteristics that he thinks are important for understanding essence. And we're just going to do our best. So it's not going to be a live reading. It's going to be too much material, but I'm just going to kind of rely on everybody to kind of do the homework and come up with just anything that you understand. Write it down, and we'll share those little. It's going to be like a mosaic, and none of the stones by themselves will have any meaning, but hopefully when some of them come together, some kind of form is going to coalesce. And that's
So
how we're going to do the next time.
Now you said 4, 5, and 6, but could you get the page numbers, because
Oh,
it
right.
might be difficult for me to find it.
All right, yeah. So in the Reeve edition, that would be pages 107 through 112.
Well, okay.
And literally, this is mind-numbing, folks. So don't despair. We'll just rip through it. Write what you understand down. Maybe if you have a lot of ability, and if you can withstand a lot of punishment, then read through it a second time, write a couple more things down, and then we're just gonna contribute whatever it is we have to this essence thought. I think, when we get further down the line, some of it will make a little tiny bit more sense, but there's no making sense of every line of this. As Bernier said, it's a completely non-linear text. I mean, no sentence necessarily follows from another.
That sounds like some sophistry trick or something Plato would object to.
It makes me think a little bit of Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I think that's probably really that might make it more endurable if you think of your experience reading Wittgenstein. No, I read through it last week and I was like, that's it. I'm quitting this group. I'm just going to flesh it all down the toilet. There's just no way in hell I can explain what's going on here and in the remotest terms. But we'll we know the sequence, right? We're going and understanding form and why form has to be understood as essence, and then ultimately why essence has to be understood as act. And if we just hold on to those monkey bars and don't get too sidetracked, I think we can cobble together a group understanding that will be great for reading, the theology chapter, the lambda at the end of the metaphysics, and then jumping into the soul. So that's the plan.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks
All
a
right,
lot.
everybody. Thank you very much for
good.
that great
I think this
conversation.
was a good session tonight. Really good.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody's contribution.
So Michael, don't forget to hit stop recording.
Okay, a sec. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share and then stop recording. Thank you.